Yeah, we're live. Got some sort of notification, so I couldn't officially go live, but we are live. I'm at Mark's again and doing a live feed, which is very cool because the internet connection is way better here than it is at West Tech. Plus, I get to hang out. It's very cool. Today we're going to talk about the what is the most important thing that you should change when you get a Junkyard LS, something that you should look at. And I've been bitten by this a couple of times, and I think that's probably fairly common, although, given the fact that a lot of these things have 200 or 300,000 miles on them, I don't think it's fair to give them a bad rap because it's time for things like that to wear out and time for things like that to be changed. But the most important thing is it ring gap, is it cylinder head, is it head gasket, is it the lifter tick, what is it? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments what you guys think. What do you think the most important thing is? And for me, I don't. Did I put my? Oh, I don't think I even put my photo up there. I'm gonna have to change the thumbnail. The most important thing to change are the lifter trays. You should spend the money. It's $20 or something, $25. The camshaft is another thing you should change. I normally don't change the oil pump, but the lifter trays are definitely a must, especially something that has 200,000 or 300,000 miles on it. You can feel it, and the way that you test it is the bad thing is you have to take the cylinder heads off to get access to them. But when you take them out, if you have the lifter in there and you just wiggle the lifter back and forth, find out how much play there is. If there's no play and they slip in, the other test that I like to do is when you take them out and slide the lifters up into the tray, can you hold it there? Will the lifters fall out? Did the lifters come out to begin with when you pulled the tray out? If all the lifters came out with the tray, you're really kind of golden. Sometimes they won't. But if they pull out with the lifter tray, that's really, really good. You'll notice when you put new lifter trays in, like I like to slide the lifters in like you're racking them in a magazine or something. When you put those in, you'll feel how difficult or how tight it is to put some of those in. Some of the cheap aftermarket ones, they're probably offshore things, I would imagine. The original GM ones are actually the ones that I like to buy. That's one place, like with wastegates, where I will actually step up and, it's not a lot of money. It's not a big difference when you're talking about a $25 part. It's not a huge change. So if it's 30 instead of 25, I'm okay with that extra $5. I just won't get the biggie fries at lunch that time. But that's a good deal because those seem to work. They seem to work better. When you're sliding the lifters in, you can feel it. It's a snug fit. It doesn't have any movement. And like I said, after 200,000 or 300,000 miles, I mean, what are you expecting? Their life has not been good. We've been beating mercilessly on the motor. Who knows? The things could be overheated and you're towing with them, and all kinds of bad things happen. So that's the thing that I like to change, and I noticed this when I was doing the L86. I was going through doing some videos on it and taking it apart. In fact, it's already down at I got all of my Summit Pro LS stuff, the forged rods, forged pistons, and then new rings and pins and all that stuff is there. So I got all that stuff together. I got the block and everything down to the machine shop already. It's down there today. So hopefully that will get put back together. So it's going to have, that motor is going to have dish pistons. It'll have forged pistons, and it'll have forged rods, and it'll have a stock new crankshaft. And so it's definitely going to be a blower motor or a turbo motor, or some kind of boost motor. So it'll have ARP studs, it'll have aftermarket heads with thick decks in them, and it'll be capable of making lots and lots of power. So that will be a fun build to do. I like doing those. I don't get to put together a lot of forged rod and piston things, and that's more than enough. If you look at the stock crank and the stock block, the aluminum block, you can make lots of power with those. Guys have done pretty big power levels with those. But it'll have LS9 head gaskets. So I remember seeing something on Facebook today about guys asking what head gaskets they could use. When we ran the 1500 horsepower stuff, we used LS9 head gaskets, and that's not an issue. We used good head studs, and we even on that particular one used factory heads 317s. They were ported, but still they were factory heads. And admittedly, we're just doing it on the engine dyno for a 10 or 15 second sweep or whatever it is. But still, that's a lot of power, and we didn't have issues. If you're blowing the head gasket out, something else is going to happen before you blow the head gasket out. So because of head gasket strength. So that LS9 has already run, millions of horsepower, at least hundreds or thousands. So you don't have to worry about that. Lots of guys, if you're going to step up from an LS9 head gasket, then you're going to put the hoops in there and stuff probably. And then you're getting serious. And then you're getting into a level where you need to start thinking about, aftermarket blocks and things like that. Because you're talking about, you're going into upper teens in the hundreds of horsepower, or 2,000 or above, and you're going to run stuff like that. So it'll be good. But the thing I recommend are and I've already been bitten by it. You guys saw the video that I have on the 4.8 where because of the trays get old and wonky and they wear out, and it allows the lifter to rotate around, and now the roller is not oriented on the camshaft. It's sideways to the camshaft, and with predictable results. It wears the wheel, it wears the cam, all sorts of bad things happen. So none of that happened with the L86. The camshaft was actually in good shape. I just threw the cam away. I just threw the crank away. I just, threw the pan away. Just because I don't like that L86 pan. I remember somebody reminding me or mentioning that when I first got that. They're like, yeah, that pan's not great. I'm like, I haven't seen one. I want to take it apart and see what it looks like. And it's definitely going to be replaced by something else. So I'll decide what to do on the oil pump. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. What oil pump should I use? Definitely going to be a turbo combination. So I like a little bit of extra oil flow. Should I just shim the stock pump, put a Mellings in it or whatever, I think you can have too much oil pressure. I don't like when we're warming them up and it's cold. If you make a run, I don't want to see the oil pressure go over 100 PSI. That seems like it's a lot. So if it's in the 80 range, that's probably fine. So let's see what you guys got going on. I've got to get back to work, back to West Tech. I'm filming the video of putting a set of rec port heads, a set of LS3 rec port heads, or I can't remember if these are 823s or 821s. They're probably not LS3. They're probably not the lightweight valves. They're probably L92 heads. But I'm putting those on a small bore 5.3. Or we're trying to put those on a small bore 5.3. I'm going to show you all of the things that's required to actually make that happen. And why it's probably a terrible idea. We all want these things to happen. I was able to see at least one video today of an AMR 500 blower on a VW application, that's an ideal application for it. I think it was a 1700. And they had it using it as a draw through. They had a carburetor side draft, an elbow and a side draft carburetor mounted on the draw through side of the blower. So that was very cool. And then running it into the ports on the side. So I think that's probably pretty cool. So let me know in the comments if you guys would like to see. I already did, and I'm doing a video on the testing that I did on the AMR blower using the LS motor to drive the AMR blower at different speeds and stuff. And we actually, what they do normally on a blower dyno is they run like a fixed RPM. They can step it up to different RPMs, but they usually hold it there and let it stabilize, and then hold it there and let it stabilize. What I did were sweeps. So we do sweeps with the motor just like we do on the engine dyno, and that way we can see what's happening with the parasitic drive. But let me know in the comments if you guys, the guys from Jim Bell, from Kenny Bell, offered use of his blower dyno. If I will send the blower, this AMR 500, if I'll send the blower to Sweden, they will actually run that blower on their blower dyno for me, so which would be very cool. I'd like to see what results they get on their blower dyno versus what I generated on the Super Richie blower dyno, and just kind of correlate it. More data is obviously going to be better, so I want to see what the difference is, if there's any. Maybe there's none. There should be some based on just the fact that they're running it differently than I do. They can regulate inlet, they regulate outlet, and it'll just be interesting to see, because I'm running a sweep and they're doing stationary loads. They let it stabilize for a good bit. I think you could do it. They could do it for 30 minutes or or even, I mean 30 minutes, 30 seconds or a minute. By then you know what it is. So let me know in the comments if you guys would like to see me send this thing to Sweden and get more AMR 500 blower, you know, dyno information. It'd be good to correlate. I would do it probably as a second video. I'll have them shoot some stuff while they're testing on it. You could kind of see their facility. Somebody today showed me some very cool blower dyno stuff. There was a guy there that had a Magnuson on his drift car, and he had a couple things that were very, very cool on it. One that I hadn't seen before. One is he had some sort of regulator that was controlling his bypass valve, and he had a knob on it where he could control the opening. So it was pretty cool that basically you can adjust the boost level on the Magnuson on a positive displacement blower, which we knew before that if we open the bypass valve, you can dramatically reduce the boost from the supercharger because you're bypassing some of it. So we've done that before. I kind of call that valet mode when we're doing it, that you lower the boost a lot because you're opening the bypass valve. It's either open or closed. But with this, you can open it different amounts. And so you could kind of control the boost. Let's say you're running 20 pounds and now you could turn it down to 18 or 16 or 15. I don't know how low it could go with the bypass valve. Normally we get 6 or 7 pounds of boost, I think, depending on the size of the bypass valve. Normally they're not that big, but we get a pretty good variation. And this was very, very cool. I hadn't seen this before, so I was asking questions about it. It was a pretty cool deal. So, you know, and that's why it's always good to watch what people are doing and come over and talk to them, and you get to see new stuff. Because I don't do a lot of things with the drift stuff. Ish was asking me some questions about the Supercharger, and I thought that they were spinning it fairly high at 20,000 RPM, but he said that the guys from Magnus said that we've spun them faster than this. So, you know, sometimes you learn stuff. It's really good. Let's see what you guys got going on. I'm gonna go ahead and we'll go to live chat, and I'll scroll back and get some chat going here. Car peeps, what's up? Ring gap, maybe an oil change, camshafts. People are still talking about what to change. Don't buy cheap lifter trays. No, don't. Definitely buy the GM ones. Live stream. Yeah, we don't change the oil because all of our junkyard motors don't have oil in them, so we put new oil in, but put new filter in them. Always a good idea to buy new trays. Yeah, I actually was going to go over to the wrecking yard today to get that inner door handle for the rear doors on my Silverado, but I'm just going to buy new ones. I think they're cheap. They're like $8 or $10, and I don't think the wrecking yard is going to be that cheap. Lifters, no, we reuse the lifters a lot. Yeah, I'm falling. Word on the streets, if it's got 140,000 miles, you don't have to gap the rings. That's not accurate. I've run some. I've pulled some apart and done ring gap on them, and even with 200,000 miles on them, they were still in the teens. So they don't wear. The board doesn't wear at all. Even motors that have, like when we did the Big Bang motor, when we had 250,000 miles on it, there was no gap, or there was no ridge at the top. So the board didn't wear at all, and the rings wore very, very little. So you still had, you didn't have any extra ring gap. So that is false. It's got a lot of miles on it. The rings are already pre-gap. No, that's a myth. You don't know what it is until you know what it is. Let's see. What's the best Johnson link bar lifter for an LS? Part number? I don't know. I don't have a part number for you. I don't know. Summit Pro LS stuff, how is that compared to more brand name stuff? Well, given the fact that how much power we've run from the stock stuff, the Summit Pro LS stuff is going to be beyond where we would ever take the motor, because it's beyond the block and beyond the stock crankshaft. Mike D's in the house. New Zealand, welcome. I have not used, I've not tested the Boostain stuff. I would like to, but what I would like to do is do a scientific test of it. I mean, we have to do a test on the chassis dyno with something that had knock sensors in it to get an idea. I'd like to just send it to a lab and have them do an actual Octane test to see what the change in octane is, so that we can really see and talk about it. Did it change it, you know, a tenth of a point? Did it change it a full point? Did it change it 10 points? That would be nice. I don't think that that's going to happen, but maybe it did. Richard, I got a problem with my 5.3. It starts to sputter and backfire when I accelerate. Could be a fuel or timing issue. Yeah, it could be all that. Do you have any check engine lights that are coming on? I would put a fuel pressure gauge on it and see if your fuel pressure is falling while that's happening. Mike, you're working on a dart? Let's talk to someone up here about cheaper dry sump setups for an L7. I found everything you need from pan, ATI dampener, 4-stage, 1 or 2 gas tanks. 1,000 all in. Okay. I can get race gas plus 12 to 15 a gallon, or an MS 109 in my Subaru. Yeah, race gas, not a cheap date anymore. YouTube, what's up? Could be a vacuum leak. Yeah, check for cracked. It's not unusual for some of the stuff in the LS, especially trucks, when they get hot and get old, that stuff does crack. Aluminum block 5.3 and LS9 gaskets, we've seen a few issues where the block deck burned out between the gasket and the deck. Bore diameter didn't clamp around the sleeve. More videos are better. I do like all the different gadgets. The way you guys do things differently. It is cool. Trunnion upgrade is a good idea for higher horsepower. I think trunnion upgrade is a good idea just because the rockers have a lot of miles on them. In the video that I did on the L86, one of the things that I showed is you should check the push rods, and you should also check the rocker cups. When you look inside your AMR, do the rotors look like aluminum or resin? There's a post on Samba where a guy had the rotors delaminate. I'll send you a link to the post. Mine feel like they're composite. They don't feel like they're aluminum. That added octane kind of works, but if you're at the track, spend the extra money. Yeah, when I race my, either the Civic when we were at Bonneville, or even the Sprint when we were at the Max and Mile, or whenever I was racing the Silver State or any of those things, we always put good gas in it. I know it's more expensive, but it's a peace of mind while we're running wide open throttle for that long. Got to change the cam retainer gasket. That one's overlooked 90% of the time. Also do an oil barbell for oil pressure. We don't change the cam retaining plate gasket. I don't ever see a problem with those. I've only ever had one of those be bad. Seems all my head bolts in the big block Chevy go through water jackets. Should I use silicone on all the bolts? If you're using bolts, it's not as much of an issue because the head will go down, the head of the bolt will go down and seal against the cylinder head. On studs, you can get water come up, but silicone's a good idea on a fastener that goes down into water. Twin turbo rec port L96 in a jet boat needs to make peak power at 6,200. I want a choppy cam. Why does it have to make peak power at 6,200? Is that what the impeller's set for? And you want a choppy cam? I think for an L96, you should put you could put either the hot rod cam in it or the red hot cam, the one that we just ran in the 5.3. Kentucky Hunter, are piston cooling nozzles worth it on a constant? You're going to put piston cooling nozzles in yourself? I like those when they come from the factory, but I haven't seen aftermarket ones done. all of the Honda stuff was like that, and we used to endurance race those, and that was a really good thing to have for endurance racing. Maybe marine if you're at wide open throttle for a long time. Usually the cooling comes from the fact that you have lots and lots of cold water that you're driving through. So the marine motors don't typically run warm. And I don't know about running the oil pan dry. You could work on the drain for the LS to make sure that you're draining back. What are the thicknesses of the stock rings? I don't know. I have to measure them and see. That's my third. Richard, I'm friends with the owner of Boostain. Might be able to work something out. We can talk about it. Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, I think Westech has some cans of it there, but I just don't want to run it on the dyno. We need to have detonation sensing to be able to run it. And like I said, I'd rather have it sent to an actual test facility where they can do an octane test. The melted aluminum 5.3 block with the LS9 gasket didn't damage any of the pistons, or heads. So you're thinking combustion was getting to the aluminum block? Is that what your point you're making? When we ran the LS9 head gaskets, we ran it on an iron block 6-liter. Yeah, JM, that's a good point. I was hoping that because he wanted lots of camshaft in it, that it doesn't have a wet exhaust. You think an 8 thousandths per inch of bore is too much ring gap? 8 times 4 is 32. I've run them that high. A lot of the big bang stuff was that high, and it works. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's overkill. Richard, would a tune help with stock LM7 and K&N stock filter? Yeah, the factory tune is going to be rich, and it's not going to have very much timing. I want to keep RPM lower so it'll live. Dry exhaust. Yep. 3D printed rotor. Are the AMR 500s 3D printed rotors? 800 horsepower will spin a AA impeller, 6,000, 6,200. 1.5 millimeters. The newer custom pistons have reliefs and ways to keep lube through the mains of the crank, but for endurance, oil squirters are nifty. I was reading the quad 4, excellent head flow. I mean, relative to what? Relative to the other GM heads? Correct about the aluminum 5.3. Okay, well, I'll lay one on there and see where we are. Pro stock rings are very thin to cut drag. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're 1 millimeter or less, probably. I would like to. I like the quad 4s. I've always liked them. I liked all the cars that they came in. I wish I would have gotten that 442 that I saw at the wrecking yard. That was pretty cool. Pretty cool just to have a quad 4 thing. I like that originally they were trying to pump up the quad 4 aftermarket industry after when they commissioned batten and fueling to build those motors. Super high horsepower stuff for Aerotech stuff. That was cool. But, you know, a good 4-valve head, put cams in it, ported heads, boost. It's nothing but happy. Nothing but happy turbo-y goodness. Quad 4 and sand rail. I don't think I've ever seen that. I've seen a lot of weird stuff in sand rails over at West Tech. Lots of the North Star motors. V6 Hondas are popular. LS's obviously everywhere. It's possible to put an LT4 supercharger on an LS. Yeah, you just have to do a different intake manifold. They made 50 factory race versions of the Quad 4s that were 700 to 1200. What did they use those for? Did they use those for IMSA or drag racing or something? What were they using them for? Lots and lots of boost. Lots of boosties. IMSA maybe, makes sense. I'm trying to get my hands on a set of ported 8.1 liter cylinder heads. Because I want to add, yeah, birds, it would be lots of boost, right? Because even if the NA motor made 250, that's still more than a few atmospheres. I'm trying to get a hold of some 8.1 cylinder heads, some ported versions, so I can put those on my 8.1. Make some 8.1 power. James, what's up, man? Like to get the NA power over 500, which that shouldn't be too hard, I wouldn't think. I can run the carbureted intake. And then it needs the turbo again. Richard, do you have any plans to do an effective turbine size? I've done an AR test already. I did that way back on the little T3s. I know LT has run a turbo on his. You want to know what turbos to get to make 1500 on an LS? The ones that we used were two S475 T4s, which those will go almost to 2000. Do you have any experience using Phytech injection? The guys at West Tech have run that. I personally haven't run it. So you think that the turbo versions were making 300 NA? That seems like a lot of power for, I'm sure, low compression NA motors. Try Halimar for the gasket studs. How much better is the LQ4 versus the LQ9? Do you mean the other way around? The LQ9 is better than the LQ4 because it has flat top pistons and it makes more power, but it doesn't. That doesn't matter. Especially if you're going to do a turbo version, you just have boost. You see Leno's videos where he drove one of the homologation 442s? Ford 6.2 versus a Chevy 6.2. I don't think that do they have a Ford 6.2 that makes 6.2 LS3 power? And I know I've never seen one of those in the engine or in the wrecking yard. Of course, I've never seen a Chevy 6.2 in the wrecking yard either. But Admiral would be happy if we did a 6.2 Ford. I did some 3000 GT stuff back in the day, just turbo upgrades and, you know, boost and things like that, but on a chassis dyno, not on an engine dyno. But I would like to run, even just ported stock heads would be fine. Yeah, I'm not going to find a Raptor engine in the wrecking yard. Yeah, Burns, it probably would be low if they were really cranking on those things, I would think. I don't know. I'm just guessing. So if you plan on camming set of heads on an LQ4, LQ9, it would be negligible difference. No, it's still going to be one. It's going to be 1 point of compression difference, basically. But if you're that doesn't matter. I wouldn't spend the money on an LQ9. If you can get an LQ4 cheap, just get that. It's a good starting point. You can make lots of power with it. Richard, E85 on a boosted application is worth power even before you change the timing. So you will get a gain in power going from gas to E85. Like if you run 10 pounds and you run gas and then you run E85, even without changing the timing, you're going to gain power. And then you're going to be able to gain even more power by changing the boosted timing. 9.4 and 10.1, so a little more than half a point. At pick aparts, the LQ4 and LQ9 are the same, but I just don't ever see either one of them. I did see, I think, an LQ4 the last time I was there. I still have the flat top pistons from the 5.3 LH6 if anybody wants them. Any love for the Gen 2 L21? Yeah, I have videos up on that. It was the high water mark of the standard small block Chevy, although it's not really a standard small block Chevy because it is reverse cooling, so it's a different block of heads. Tune E85 NA at 9-to-1 or 12-to-1. On a gas scale, it would be the same as if it's an NA motor. It would be the same on the gas scale as gas is. We run it at like 12.5-to-1, and we run it at 11.5-to-1 under boost. Truck North with a 2800 sound. Yeah, that should work. In order to run E85, what do you have to do to your fuel system? You have to have an E85 compatible fuel system. So the injectors are not a problem, but the lines in the pump. Do you know if an L86 can be bored to 5.7? Yes, it can. What work did you do on the Magnum? I walked by it. I bumped into it twice while I was down here on this trip. $78, 74.81 hot side on a 304 rock buggy breathe. Yes, it will breathe. And you don't need that big of a turbo on a 304 if you're doing a rock climbing. In my opinion, that turbo's too big. I think you should put a GT45 on it and go make 10 pounds and go be happy. At least you made it feel loved. I did. I blew it a little kiss. Richard, happy to help. You ever tested the GM showroom stock cam? 239, 251 is a showroom stock cam. That's not a showroom stock cam that ever came from the factory. How would this be endurance racing a 6.2? I don't know. I don't know how that I'm just judging by the lift and the duration. It seems like it would be a stable profile, but you'd have to run it on a Spintron to see if it is indeed stable. But the GM guys are pretty sharp, so it probably would be. Were you gonna fly cut the cylinders on the 5.3 on the for the rec port heads? Yeah, we have to. No small block Chevy heads for sale. Is it true that E85 takes 1/3 more fuel? I think it's more like 20 or 25%. Richard, I got mine going. I sent you a link. But then my friend that was using his shop passed away, so back on hold a little bit. Okay. Liquid propane is high octane. I think, yeah. I mean, if you look at Ack Miller's stuff, he liked that. I just haven't ever run it. Have you ever run lower percentages? Yeah, I probably have, and don't even know it because I just get pumpy 85, and so it could be as low as E50. Any plans to get your hands on a ZZ632? I don't plan on it. I mean, if they offered me one, obviously I would run it, but that's way beyond my budget. Biggest issue I see with boosted Junkyard engines is cylinder wall finish. No depth left in the grooves to hold oil, and you get excessive blow by. Bottle hone is your friend. I haven't seen that on these motors. LPG's 110 octane. You never hear anything about the Quad 4's replacement, the 2.4 twin cam. I have seen those in the wrecking yard, but you're right, I've never seen anybody run one. Do you have any idea about LS9 cam RPM range? Which cam are you talking about? Problems with the tripod. Yeah, I don't have a tripod. All I have is this. And I'm just holding it. There we go. Come back to me. I need some lighting. Trying to be steady, but I gotta hold it at an angle so it wants to fall. I didn't bring my tripod. I should have, but I forgot it at the shop. At the shop. The Corvette C6 ZR1 cam. Do I know what the LS9 cam RPM range is? Yes, I do. I've run the LS9 cam on lots of different things. There's a Rampage for sale. Nice. Treating that Carroll Shelby used an Oldsmobile Aurora 4-liter. Yeah, he did. Run gapless rings. I have, but only on NA motors. I'm in the lower Midwest, and the last one's at my local pick apart. Multiple 6-liters and more than 10 5.3s. Turbo my small block 94 C2500. Think about trying to dual fuel with propane. It has a standalone management running the TBI unit with a rising rate fuel pressure regulator. B&R, that's I mean, I'm not saying that there's not a gas station that would charge that, but that's way over. I paid less than $5 a gallon for 87 on my way down here, but $5.20 or something is probably where it's at. I am going to do a 24-hour show. I just don't know when it is. So your 304 is making 500 foot-pounds of torque? Is it a turbo thing? TMS Propane and Whittier was the genius spot behind Octane and the Mopar 440 bus propane project. Ford has CNG supercharged Triton V10s for full-size bus applications. Those would be cool to find. Would you do an aftermarket lid and spacer test for Holley high Rams on an LS? So you want to put a spacer between the lid? Are you just trying to increase plenum volume on that? And what aftermarket lid are you talking about? Our 304 turbo rock buggy is running propane. Greg, I just ran another 500 horsepower 5.3. This one made the most so far. Doubled my money on the 2 aluminum 5.3s I bought last month. Nice. Turbo propane. Okay, so what you're wanting, a bigger turbo and more boost or something? We got 98 on pump here in New Zealand. Yeah, that's a different rating scale, though. That's basically the equivalent of 93 here in the States. Greg, let's see. I'm going to see what Greg said. Yeah. Yeah, you can do 500 with a stock bottom end. What is the strongest GM 4-cylinder? The Ecotech stuff was making, I think guys were making 2,000 with those that were drag racing them. I think I remember the guys from Roush telling me. Yeah, Greg, I'm going to do the video on the build that we did, this latest one. What's the maximum effective RPM range of the LS9 cam on supercharged 416? On a 416, it's not going to be that high. But if what supercharger do you have, and what intake manifold do you have, and what cylinder heads do you have? Because all that's going to help determine what's going to do with RPM. I didn't want to sell him, but the guy kept going up on his offer. Hey, we all have a price, right? Should be running my LS3 at 98. Yeah, I think that is the equivalent of 93. And so we run them on 91 in California because that's all we have. About 4 LS blocks in the past because I knew they would cost money now. Yeah, lots of guys are taking the 5.3 aluminum blocks and doing and sleeving them and making big motors out of them. That works good. I'm waiting to see an Ecotech 3rd gen. But you have to fill the block. I didn't ask them that. I didn't even ask if they're using the stock block. So your 1974 Bolt 350 in a Camaro makes 620 wheel horsepower with a Procharger. That's good. We've made more than that, so you're safe to go up. How often you visit West Tech? It just depends on what the schedule is like, but usually once a month, every couple weeks. Overly, you're putting 401 heads on it. Do they flow well? And 500 wheel horsepower, so let's say 600 flywheel horsepower. Do you know what the thing makes? Did you ever test it before the turbo? Do you know what makes NA? There are a few companies making aluminum sheet metal lids for them. Shear is one of them. I see a bunch of companies making spacers. I guess a way to fix the tight throat. So you're talking about the angle of attack from the throttle body going up. So I guess they're doing that for hood clearance. I can tell you that I have run a test between the single throttle body entry and a dual quad entry. And the dual quad entry is definitely worth more power. No, there's a motor octane and a research octane, Jason. They're two different test procedures. Your Atlas Ameribear got me thinking about the 5-cylinder Colorado motor. Yep. Down station 93 is 402. 91 is 422 and E85 is 269 in Omaha. Yeah, that's the nice thing about driving across the United States. When I went to Ohio to take the Omni there, it gas is a lot cheaper in other places. So Northern New York turbo and fab. My standalone on the 94 C25 allows me to keep the gauges and harnesses with the turbo and TBI, but the 454 TBI injectors are limited. Yeah, they are. You could do it. I saw the guys way back in the day from Turbo City, they did dual quad motors for that reason, so that they could have more fuel and put 2 sets of the throttle bodies on there. If opening up an LS1 to add some ring gap, is there any benefit to putting in fresh rings? You can. The guys would argue with you about putting fresh rings on an old bore that's not at least honed. I've done it every way. We've mixed and matched them. We even put the rings not in the right cylinder and stuff, and it still works. Thinking about aluminum 5.3 with OEM LS1 piston, stock 243s, and a cam Richard suggests. Just tell me how much power you want to make, and we'll give you an idea what cam. Why can't all LS blocks be bored to the same diameter? The aluminum ones don't have some of the aluminum ones, the LS1, LS2, and LS3 don't have enough wall thickness for that. Some of the iron ones start out much, much smaller, like the 4.8 and 5.3. They're 3.780 bores, and you cannot bore them, although guys try to do it. They have different size sleeves in them, but it's not a water passage thing. It's just different sleeve thickness. I watched the BMA group video today. A small block Chevy 4.4 symmetrical head with a 480 CFM, 1100 horsepower. Yeah, if you do the math on that, they knew how to build a motor, obviously, because that's a good amount. That's more than 2 horsepower per CFM. That's pretty good though. I'm running CNC ported LS3 821s, fast LSXR, Vortec V7, YSI Supercharger. And how much RPM are you running? The average of motor and research is what you see? Okay. And I wonder if they're just using, are they just using research over there? Same thing in Australia, right? Overly built, a 45 to 50% drivetrain loss, 513 gears, 40-inch tires, turbo 400. All fits under the hood. That's cool. Having trouble making my stock valve covers fit with my Manton trunnion kit. My passenger side cover has a plastic piece on the inside. I'm assuming it's sort of a baffle for the PCV. Take it off. Why did your trunnion kit change that? Greg, I'm gonna scroll back. Greg, you're not going to see 500 horsepower with the stock 243 heads. Or a stock idle. The way that you get 500 horsepower with a stock idle is that you turbocharge it. How long do you think a 6-liter boosted with bolt-ons will last drag racing with stock bottom end? A long time. I mean, we made 75 pulls on one near the 1,000 horsepower level. So guys outrace them for multiple seasons if you don't hurt it by doing something incorrectly. Sean, 11-to-1, 235 cam, DSS pistons. You can run a supercharger, but you'll have to run good gas on that. Some valve covers have the plastic piece. Some have metal looking baffle. Yeah, the metal looking baffle. I think the ones we run are later, like LS3 styles. Are you interested in testing my small block Ford 331? I have 3 different intake manifolds for it. Stock HO, cut and ported HO, and 93 Cobra. Those are all manifolds I would have tested already. The NA 304 buggy was 135 wheel horsepower. Wow. Yeah, see, Northern, there you go. Dual quads, man. I'm buying a GT 45 turbo is a 98 millimeter. It's a 69 millimeter on the cold side. You might have just popped the gaskets out, but you were, if you were, that's a lot of crankcase pressure. Airman, let's see. I'm trying to scroll back and see. Scroll in. Okay, oh, that was the RPM for that. I have a 2007 LH653 aluminum. That's like I have. Apparently those can be bored out to LS1 size. Yeah, the 5.3 blocks can, but not the LS1, LS2, or LS3. What makes a Honda engine better than a V8? Age-old question, like how cheap V8s are. I don't know about the word better because I don't know what your definition is. Obviously I'm a Honda guy and I like them, but I like all engines. But Hondas have a much higher specific output. They just have less displacement. $800 for a Gen 6 big block? No, thank you. Oh, the baffle doesn't fit between the rockers. Okay, I got you. What do you think are the best heads for the money on a small block Ford with boost? 660 to the tire at 17 pounds. That you're not limited by your cylinder heads. Do you have 210 Renegade airflow research heads? There's something going on with your combination. On the 363 that we had, the small block Ford, it had it made 1,017 at 17 pounds to the flywheel though. £17 used to be more than doubling the power output. It's 300 at a tire. So is it a mild combination or something? Anything else that could have hurt? No, you just probably have to fix the gaskets. There's an old horsepower TV episode from the 90s where they supercharged the TBI, but they had a special throttle body spacer. They had extra injectors. I've seen those. Paxton used to sell those with their kit. Is a 7875 too big for basically stock 5.3 with 799 heads and a stage 2 truck cam? You should pick the turbo for the amount of power that you want to make. It's not too big or too small. Do you want 1,000 horsepower? Because the 7875 is getting up near there. If it's a Gen 2 VS Racing one, then you could be up near 1,000 horsepower. If it's a Gen 1, then it's going to be more like 800 or 900. £18 on the 304 propane buggy with 320 wheel horsepower. So you doubled the power output on 18 pounds? That doesn't seem right. Nicholas, yeah, you should be able to take the baffle off. You may have to fabricate something else to cover that hole if you uncover it. So you should have a little bit of a baffle. I have a 363 dart block with a Super Victor Jr. and AccuFab 90mm throttle body. Heads are Renegade knockoff heads. So I don't know anything about those heads then. No intention of doing the 118 over. We bore the iron blocks from the 5.3 displacement from 3.780 to 3.905. So we go out a lot on those. But I haven't done that to aluminum block, and nor would I, especially if I'm running boost, because I wouldn't make the cylinders thinner, because you just make all the power that you want with boost. VS Racing demo kit want to get 500, start at 500 horsepower with room to grow. Yeah, you're fine. Were you saying boost pressure is literally a calculation for power? Yes, I'm saying that it can be. 14.7 pounds, you'll double the power output. And then any percentage of that in terms of boost, so 10 pounds is like 0.68 or 0.69. So if you multiply your NA power times 1.69, you'll get what it makes at 10 pounds. That's a nice thing about the Holdner power boost formula, the patented Holdner power boost formula. What is the max safe RPM for stock bottom end 5.3, 20 pounds of boost? It's not the max safe RPM. You should run the thing in the RPM range where it's making the power that you want it to make. The nice thing about a turbo combination is you don't have to run a lot of RPM with it. Would you advise against deleting the knock sensors on a Gen 3? So you have to ask somebody else that. I don't do tuning with the factory ECU, so we don't ever run knock sensors on any of the things that I run on the dyno. Correct me if I'm wrong, would 14.7 pounds not double the N8? Yes, it does. That's the modifier. Have you gotten to play with a 3.6 liter 4-cylinder from Blueprint that takes the LS heads? No, because that doesn't actually work. I mean, there's not really a motor like that. I mean, there is an industrial motor, short block like that, but they didn't run it with the LS head on it. That's not a real thing. That was just a mock-up. Yep, it is. It's exactly linear like that. So 2 atmospheres, you take your 500 horsepower motor, and now you make 1500 horsepower. I shipped at 6,200. Yeah, we don't run, at least I don't run on the knock sensors on the engine dyno. One more minute. It's already been an hour. Time flies. We're having fun, right? What would expect the EGTs on a turbo E85? I don't know. I don't remember running EGTs on... We normally just run an O2 sensor. Truck Norris is definitely... I would pick a Truck Norris over a Stage 1 truck cam. The Truck Norris cam does not have a lot of overlap. Yeah, I did get on early. You have a 206 intake and a 202 exhaust? What what cylinder head is that? Using the stock cam and intake on any motor, 14.7 pounds will double the power. No, I'm not saying it does that on every time. We've gone over this many, many times in the past on the live feed. There are things that would stop you from doubling the power output, but it's not the heads and it's not the camshaft usually. What stopped, because with the stock head and stock cam, you're not going to be making very much NA power. But at 14.7 pounds, if we take a 5.3 and put it on the engine dyno and run it NA, it makes about 350 horsepower. If we add 14.7 pounds of boost, it makes about 700. And so it will do that even with the stock stuff. But here are the things that stop you from doing it. If you don't have a big enough turbo to support the 700 horsepower that you need to double that power output, if you don't have intercooling, you can't do that because the charge temperature is going to be too high. You're not going to be able to run enough. And if you don't run enough timing and your air fuel is not correct and your charge temperature is not correct, you're not going to be able to do that because that would all stop you and make you make less power. If you have some sort of restriction on the turbo, like a really small exhaust on the turbo, or you have an inlet on the turbo that's too small, a restricted inlet on the turbo, all of those things can make it so that you don't follow this formula. If you have all of those things correct, this is what the formula does, and it does it on all the motors. In fact, I've seen it do more than that on some of the motors, like Honda's in particular. So it works pretty well. And then, so the nice thing about that is if you use that formula, if instead of 350 horsepower you're making on a stock 5.3, now you're making 450 because you put a camshaft in it, a good camshaft. Now at 14.7, you're not making 700 anymore. You're making 900. Again, you have to have a turbo that will support that 900, but that's what boost does. It's a multiplier of the original output. Vortec is a T-trim. That's enough to make 1,000 horsepower or nearabouts. 145 times 2, that's right, 300. You're right there. And sometimes it's like that, like the little sprint motor. We're gaining 2 or 3 horsepower per pound of boost. It's not very much because that's what happens. And on that note, it is time to go. Hopefully you guys all have a good night. I'm going to go back to Westech and do some more filming on the rec port heads on the small bore 5.3 liter. I'll see you guys all tomorrow.